People who grew up in the 1800s carried a psychology that feels almost unreal to anyone born in the modern world. Not because they were superhuman, and not because life was romantic or beautiful, but because survival shaped their minds in a way we no longer experience. Their childhood wasn't designed to protect their feelings. It was designed to prepare them for reality. And reality back then was harsh, uncertain, and unforgiving. In the 1800s, life didn't slow down for children. Childhood was short, sometimes painfully short. You weren't raised to find yourself. You were raised to become useful. By the time many children today are learning how to use a tablet, children in the 1800s were already working, helping their families survive, and understanding that their actions had real consequences. There was no illusion of safety, no guaranteed comfort, no promise that things would work out. Disease was common, death was visible, hunger was normal. And because of that, people developed a very different relationship with fear. Fear wasn't something to analyze. It was something you lived with. You woke up with it, you worked with it, and you moved forward anyway. Psychologically, this created a mindset that modern people rarely experience, a mindset built around endurance. People from the 1800s didn't expect life to be fair. They didn't expect happiness to be constant. They didn't expect help to arrive. If something went wrong, the question wasn't, why me? The question was, what now? And that single difference changes everything. In the 1800s, most people were born into responsibility, not later in life, not after school, from the beginning.
Families depended on each other in a way that doesn't exist anymore. If you didn't work, the family suffered. If you didn't contribute, everyone felt it. This created a deep sense of duty that became part of a person's identity. Responsibility wasn't a burden, it was survival. Children watched their parents work themselves to exhaustion without complaint, not because they were emotionless, but because complaining didn't change anything. You worked because work kept people alive. You endured because endurance was the difference between surviving winter or not. This taught people something powerful very early in life. Effort matters more than feelings. People in the 1800s also grew up without constant stimulation. No screens, no entertainment on demand, no distractions designed to keep the mind busy. Silence was normal. Boredom was normal. And boredom over time turns into thought. That's something we've lost. When your mind isn't constantly distracted, it learns to sit with reality, to reflect, to observe. People thought deeply, not because they were philosophical by nature, but because there was space to think. Long walks, long days, long nights. Time moved slower, and the mind adapted to that pace. This slower mental rhythm created patience, not the kind taught in books, but the kind forced by life. Crops didn't grow faster because you wanted them to. Journeys took days or weeks. Messages took time. Nothing was instant, and so people learned to wait without losing themselves. Compare that to today. Now look at the psychology of modern generations. We live in a world where waiting feels like punishment, where silence feels uncomfortable, where boredom feels like something to escape. Our brains are trained to expect immediate feedback, immediate results, immediate relief. People in the 1800s didn't have that luxury. They also lived with constant uncertainty. There was no safety net, no insurance, no emergency services the way we know them. If something happened, you relied on yourself, your family, or your community. And communities weren't optional, they were essential. This built a strong sense of interdependence. People didn't isolate themselves emotionally. They couldn't afford to. Trust was built slowly, but when it was built, it mattered. Reputation mattered. Your word mattered. If you said something, you were expected to stand by it, because breaking trust had real consequences. Psychologically, this created people who were careful with their promises, careful with their words, careful with their actions, not because they were afraid, but because they understood weight. Words weren't cheap. Choices weren't reversible. And then there's emotional resilience. People from the 1800s experienced loss regularly. Siblings didn't always survive childhood. Parents didn't always live long lives. Friends disappeared. Life changed suddenly and often. Grief wasn't something you processed in therapy. It was something you carried while continuing to function. This doesn't mean they didn't feel pain. It means they learned how to live with it. They became masters of endurance, learning to find moments of joy even amidst hardship. Their resilience wasn't taught, it was forged by circumstance, day by day. Modern generations are often taught to avoid discomfort at all costs. In the 1800s, discomfort was unavoidable, and because of that, people developed a different emotional structure, less fragile, less reactive, not numb, but grounded. They understood that pain was part of life, not a sign that something had gone wrong. They also learned to value the small things, a warm meal, a safe home, a reliable friend, because these were never guaranteed. Another major difference is identity. In the 1800s, people didn't constantly question who they were. Identity was shaped by role, responsibility, and contribution. You were a farmer, a worker, a parent, a provider. Your value came from what you did, not how you felt about yourself. Today, identity is internal, fluid, and constantly examined. That brings freedom, but also confusion. People now spend years trying to understand themselves, while people in the 1800s spent their lives building something outside themselves. Neither is perfect, but they create very different psychological outcomes. People from the 1800s also learned patience in ways we rarely do today. Life moved slower, but every action mattered, and every decision had weight. People from the 1800s also lived closer to nature. Weather wasn't background noise, it controlled your life. Seasons mattered. Time was measured by daylight, not clocks. This created a natural awareness of limits. You couldn't force life to bend to your schedule. You adapted to it. Modern life, on the other hand, tries to eliminate limits. Artificial light removes night. Technology removes distance. Convenience removes effort. And while that makes life easier, it also removes the constant reminders that humans are not in control of everything. People in the 1800s knew this instinctively. They understood that life was fragile, that health wasn't guaranteed, that tomorrow wasn't promised. And instead of causing constant anxiety, this awareness often created presence. They savored accomplishments more deeply and noticed the subtle beauty in ordinary days. You appreciated what worked. You valued what lasted. You didn't assume anything would be there forever. Now compare that to today's world. Modern generations live longer, safer, more comfortable lives. But psychologically, many feel overwhelmed, anxious, and disconnected. Not because life is harder, but because the mind evolved for a slower, simpler environment. We're exposed to more information in one day than someone in the 1800s saw in years. Our nervous systems are constantly stimulated. Our attention is constantly pulled. Our sense of meaning is constantly questioned. People from the 1800s didn't chase meaning. Meaning came from necessity. They learned to act decisively and accept outcomes, good or bad, without complaint. They valued skill, patience, and persistence over convenience or instant gratification. So here's the real question. Was life harder in the 1800s? Absolutely. Was the psychology stronger? In many ways, yes. Not because they were better people, but because they were shaped by a world that demanded strength, patience, and responsibility every single day. And now, we live in a world that demands adaptability, emotional intelligence, and mental flexibility. Different worlds create different minds. Some of the lessons they learned are invisible to us now, but they shaped the foundation of human resilience. So ask yourself this. Would you survive the 1800s with today's mindset? Or would someone from the 1800s struggle in today's world? Could you endure the daily challenges they faced day after day and still find purpose in your work and relationships? And which one do you think is harder to live in? Tell me what you think in the comments. And tell me this too. If you had to choose, would you rather grow up in the 1800s or now? If this made you think differently, subscribe. We go deeper every day.